All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Craig Sipes, and I am the STEAM coordinator for Local District East. And I'm very happy to be here with you this morning. I would like to take a moment to have our co-presenters introduce themselves, our mighty STEAM team. Let's start with Erica.
Hello, everyone. My name is Erica Lee. I am serving the northern communities and focusing on elementary. Lillian, go.
Hi, I'm Lillian Nava and I support Huntington Park, Walnut Park, and City of Vernon schools. Inyang.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Inyang Lee. I'm the other Lee, and I support Southgate and Bell Cudahy Maywood.
Thank you. So we're interested in hearing from you about these last 2 weeks. How have the last 2 weeks, the first 2 weeks of this semester, been for you? What are some highlights or some challenges that you've been able to? You're obviously here today, so you've overcome all of the challenges that have been set before you thus far. What are some things that you've encountered that have been joyful or just some challenges for you? We'll have you share out verbally, if you like.
I could say one highlight, it's also bad, but all day small group instruction. I've had max 12 students. I have one day I had 1 student.
Wow, 1 student 1 day. My goodness. Thank you, Mary. Good to see you again. It's been a couple days. Gabriella says, it's been so crazy, few students. Yes. Yes, I had the pleasure of spending last week in a 4th grade classroom, and half the kids were there, as you know, probably that's what's happening in your classrooms too. All right, so thank you for sharing out. And okay, Leticia says positive, returning to work. Thank you, Leticia. So we are going to engage in a 4-part series here. This is part 1 of a 4-part series. There's a leadership series, meaning that what we've got for you is we've got a set of 4 PDs that we're going to go through, and we're going to approach this through the leadership lens. And the 4 PDs are centered on this diagram that you see on this quadrant on the slide right now. These are what are called the ambitious science teaching practices. There's 4 of them. And today we're going to spend time on the first one, and then we'll work our way through the next 4 sessions, all the way through each of the practices. And the idea is that after each of these PDs, you'll have 1 PD that you can take back to your school and lead with your folks at your school on each of the practices. And we'll get into, we're not going to spend time today talking about like all of the practices. Next time we'll do that. We're just going to kind of jump into practice number 1 for today. But just to sort of just get you thinking about what these practices are. These are teacher practices. We're going to ask you to read the 4 practices and to reflect upon how you've engaged your students in these different practices, because you've likely already engaged your students in these practices. So how have you done that? Or thinking about in the future, how might you engage your students in one of these practices? So these practices are, number 1, these are what teachers do: planning for engagement with important science ideas, eliciting students' ideas, supporting ongoing changes in thinking, and pressing for evidence-based explanations. So what we're going to have you do is I'm going to share with you a participant slide deck. I'm going to put that into the chat right now. And then I'm going to ask you to open up, I'm going to ask you to open the participant slide deck. It's going to be a forced copy. We're going to give you all these slides at the end. So you're going to get all of these slides very soon. But this is just a participant copy. It's just got some selected slides. So open up to slide number 2. And then you're going to look at slide 2 while you go into a breakout room. And you'll have 1 minute to discuss with each of your breakout mates what it is that you've done, or what do you plan to do in the future that ties in to at least one of the ambitious science teaching practices. Any questions before we send you into the breakout rooms? Okay, here we go. All right. Okay, welcome back. So now you've at least got a little bit of some idea of what these 4 ambitious science teaching practices are, and we're going to now dive into number 1. And when we meet again next time, we're going to actually go over an introduction for all 4 of them, a deeper introduction for all 4 of them. But today we're just going to dive into number 1. So now I'm going to share with you the participant slide deck, and I'm sorry. This is the slide deck that we're running through now. This is the Train the Trainer slide deck, and as we're going through today's PD, then you're going to be wearing 2 different hats. So those 2 different hats are that the one hat is that you are a learner. And so when you see the white slides, these are the learner slides. And when you see the lavender colored slides, then those are the facilitator slides. So 2 roles, you're going to be a learner, you're going to be a facilitator. This is the leader PD. So here's a lavender slide. So when you see this is when you're popping into your facilitator role. Otherwise, you'll be in the learner role. And those will be the actual presentation slides. Okay, so today, the objectives and outcomes are that engaged participants will understand the power of phenomena in driving practice-centered learning through storylines. The reason why, and then from that, participants will be able to use curriculum resources to plan their units of instruction. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Erica.
Hello, everyone. So I'm sure you've all seen this before. It should look familiar, hopefully. We are looking at these instructional levers, the foci for this school year, and we're really going to be noticing at the heart of the diagram, we have student voice. And so we really want to be focusing on student voice and building that student voice as we look at these 3 other levers around it. And so today we're going to look at lever 1, which is deep clarity of learning goals, deeply. So we see that lever 2 is building precision of pedagogy, and lever 3 is shifting our practice in high capacity building. So we're really going to be starting with an overview on why establishing that deep clarity of learning goals is essential to improving instruction and amplifying student voice. So here we have our next generation science standards, our NGSS. When you're looking for a performance expectation, you'll see that kind of in that gray slide area. For example, the middle school, high school, or elementary school physical science or earth science. It's the general format for what you'd expect to see. We have our performance expectations right there. It says that they're used by test makers, and every performance expectation kind of prompts a cast question. So for our fifth graders, this is kind of what test makers are looking at. And this is for teachers, this is where we're planning our units, what our learning targets are. So it's, you'll notice that these performance expectations were developed using elements of the framework, and one of the resources shared, which is one of the resources you will get, and they're usually utilized by the teachers, again, for unit planning. Then we look at our 3 dimensions. We have our science and engineering practices, what we lovingly call our SEPs, our disciplinary core ideas in the center in orange, and then our cross-cutting concepts. So these 3 dimensions, this is where we as science teachers live. These three dimensions are used for our lesson planning, and there are connections to other DCIs, disciplinary core ideas. You'll notice in this screen, it shows us a connection to 5th grade, if there is any. And then we have our common core connections. So there's a lot of integration with ELA, for example, and you'll see that teachers can look for how they can integrate in ELA, reading, writing, a lot of speaking and listening. Then, of course, this is kind of our cheat sheet, if you will. We see that we're always looking at those 3 dimensions again. So they live right here, the NGSS lives here. So we must include at least 1 science and engineering practice. What we're referring to as our student moves. What are the students doing? How are they doing that, right? How are they trying to figure it out? Then at least 1 disciplinary core idea, and then 1 cross-cutting concept. And the questions at the bottom kind of guide you when assessing if your lessons are 3-dimensional. Do I have something that my students do they know what they are trying to figure out, the DCI? Do we know, how are our students trying to figure out? And then our cross-cutting concept of how are our students thinking about it? These are the questions that we really want to use to guide our instruction. Next slide, please. Thank you. So here are those student moves that we mentioned. Now, there are 8 science and engineering practices, but we are grouping these main 3 of high leverage practices. Practice 2, develop and using models. Practice 6, constructing explanations and designing solutions. And practice 7, engaging in argumentation from evidence. And you'll see that a common thread here is that claim, evidence, and reasoning or justifying. So when looking at the California Science Test, the CAST blueprint for 8th grade, 5th grade, many of the questions are centered around these 3 practices. Now we're calling them big shifts in NGSS, but we know that NGSS has been around for a while. We're really wanting to focus on first explaining a phenomena and designing solutions, having our students drive the learning to make sense of relevant phenomena and or designing solutions to a problem. And then second big shift is using integrated 3-dimensional learning and assessment. So we looked at those 3 dimensions. At each grade level, teachers, we need to intentionally select practice-centered tasks to aid our students' sense-making of phenomena and or designing of those solutions. So really understanding our science and engineering practices and thinking about how our students are learning the science. So here we're back at those 3 levers, and we're going to be focusing on our precision of pedagogy. That's what we're going to be looking at for our science instruction. This is what we're calling a storyline kind of placemat, if you will. The what we want to really ask ourselves, what's the connection between the 3 dimensions of NGSS and our phenomena? So it's this backbone of a unit storyline. A unit is launched with the anchoring phenomena at the bottom, you'll see in the cloud. And from here, students develop their initial explanations or their models. And it's okay if they're oversimplified and short, but it's to encourage the students to demonstrate their thinking as best as they can. They're not expected to know all the answers. This is just what do they understand and know about it at this moment. Then over the course of the unit, students engage in multiple investigating practices, sense-making practices, and other learning activities throughout those lessons. And we as teachers plan to support our students' ongoing changes in thinking and provide that deep clarity of learning goals. That you'll notice there are parts in this storyline where we include opportunities for students to revise their explanations, because they're going to come back to their initial maybe and hopefully realize there are some things in there that I need to rethink, I need to revamp. Maybe they change things, and that's okay. The whole process is okay. So students continue to then build their knowledge to construct a gapless explanation using the evidence that they've collected to support their claims and about the phenomena by the end of the unit. And then they come up with that final explanation. So that word I've been using, phenomenon, right? We talk about it a lot in science, and to understand it a little better, a phenomenon is an event or circumstance or an experience that can be observed by one's senses. And so you can see just a picture of glass breaking. Like, how does that phenomenon happen? How does it work? We've seen maybe an opera singer or a singer being able to break a glass with their voice. So then these are events that students can develop models and explanations for over the course of the unit. It motivates them to try to figure out and explain what's going on. And then they have to draw upon a lot of different science concepts to build their gapless explanation. And it also engages them in multiple ways, investigations, conversations, dialogue with their peers. So this is really a great way to anchor their science learning.
And just to jump on there a little bit, so when we go back to the prior slide, it's starting off a unit with an anchoring phenomenon is that chance to ground in the real world and really start from a place of getting kids to build agency about we're gonna figure out how to explain how our world and how our universe works.
The idea behind that being, it's not just a separate science concept or thing they have to solve lesson, but something that's really connected to them or something that they might have noticed in real life. So it gives them more of an interest. Yeah, thank you. So as I mentioned with our storyline little map, we want our main objective in teaching science to be supporting our students' changes in thinking over time. It's okay to come back and revise, right? They start with that initial course science idea at the beginning, and they build upon it, and we see how their understanding changes throughout the unit. And that's really the point, the purpose, right? We're not all going to have a clear and full understanding at the beginning. So we really want to make sure that we're helping them build upon that and grow from there. So here we have our first facilitation slide deck. So this is where we now jump into the role as facilitators. If and when you present this to your staff, what are the key ideas you might want to make sure to highlight with this activity, with the slides that we had just gone over? What are some logistical or planning issues to consider as you're facilitating, or some alternate protocols you might use and why? And then last question here, what are some possible teacher responses or potential challenges to consider when planning for this activity? So we're going to be putting you in breakout rooms to share your thinking on these slides. and then give you a few minutes and we'll come back and then we'll share out. 4 minutes, Craig says. All right, thank you for joining us back. So coming back to our questions here, remembering that we are the leaders, our science leaders at our schools. What are some things that you spoke about in your groups that you might want to share out that you can be thinking about as you present these slides, as you think about phenomenon or just the NGSS? We can just openly share out.
Yeah, what do you want to make sure that your folks are getting? What are the key points here that you want to make sure they're getting when you're presenting this?
Mhm.
I'll share some thoughts. Well, as a teacher, I think if I'm receiving this information, I want it to be practical. I want it to be something I can implement right away. And I also want it to be safe because of what we're going through, which is the biggest challenge right now. So I think that maybe once diving into the slides, we can have the staff share ideas on how it can be done safely. For example, on a good day, I've noticed some classes will take their STEM activities outdoors and let the kids work outside for a bit. But yeah, you guys posed a good question to consider, being that we're all going through some difficult times right now.
Thank you for sharing. I think that's a big concern. What do we do about COVID?
And something we discussed in our group was, teachers always, they're concerned with the time constraint within the day. I don't have time. When can I do this? And so just highlighting those, that there are a lot of ELA standards integrated in science. And I think maybe even providing them, highlighting those standards for them, giving, teachers, as we mentioned in our group, on Tuesday afternoon, they don't really want to, they're tired, their attention is, not as focused, just like kids, so what we were thinking is maybe as facilitators having this, going over this maybe during psychomotor first thing in the morning. So just trying to keep it more engaging for teachers too, and having those, like you said, making it easy, providing them with what they need.
Thank you for sharing. That's definitely a big thing that we as our LDEs team have been trying to focus in on and share with their teachers is there's a lot of integration in science and ELA. So if you teach your science standards really well, you're actually teaching ELA standards really well also. And your curriculum should map out those standards pretty clearly, what connections there are to the reading and the writing and the speaking and listening. So I am going to hand it off now. I believe it's just kidding.
Yeah, sorry. I'm going to jump in for a second. So one main thing that we want to make sure that you're bringing back is that a big shift in what we're talking about here with NGSS is building big ideas over time. And what that means is that students' thinking is going to change over time. And so really building a storyline. This is where the deeper learning comes in. And I'm gonna oppose that to just those few science lessons that occur in a semester where they're just standalones. Maybe they're really great lessons, but they're only single lessons. So they may be really good single lessons, but how do they help a student to to really develop deeper thinking skills and analytical skills and critical thinking skills and change ideas over time. So this approach is where we're basing on phenomena and going through several lessons and having students revise their thinking over time. Provides that opportunity to really give students that chance to develop critical thinking skills, analytical skills, and those 21st century skills in general. And so Ms. Arias was talking about the time factor with that, or was, I'm sorry, was it Diane SB? So sorry. And so then it's critical that then, as she said, that we look for those areas of integration as well, so that we can cover some benchmark. We don't have to do as much benchmark if we're covering it in our curriculum. So those are really big key takeaways for this section. We want to make sure that all teachers understand that. All right. In-Young, are you up? Is it your turn?
It's my turn.
Yay.
All right. So we have a quick video for you to watch, and we're going to be introducing an idea for you to notice and wonder about. So if you can put yourself in the position of students in this moment and ask yourself, what do you notice? What do you wonder? And can you use scientific reasoning to support an explanation for why this is happening? Let's take a look.
It's the maglev.
Dude!
Look at this thing. Whoa!
Goodness!
Yeah, I got it, but it was so fast. Oh my God. 500 kilometers per hour? That is double the speed of the bullet train.
It is so fast that you might have missed it. If you could please take a moment to prepare in the chat something that you noticed or wondered in this quick video clip. And if scientific reasoning is coming into play with all that, please share an explanation for what you think is happening. Let's prepare in the chat, and then if you can please share. You can also, of course, unmute because we're a rather small group, and share your voice. What do you notice? What do you wonder? Miss Rodriguez says the train is really fast. How fast can it go? How does it go so fast? His excitement, and that he made a comparison, yes. No wheels. Is there a rocket involved? So you're experiencing this just as students. Thank you for sharing your noticings and your wonderings. Why are we asking you to experience this? Well, especially because I do think we have some third grade teachers in here. You may recognize this. This is a phenomenon that comes in a 3rd grade Amplify Science unit. If we can go to the next slide, perhaps this short video looks familiar. This is in the 3rd grade Amplify Balancing Forces unit. And in there, you have a very similar video that's animated, of course, to show something that students can notice and wonder about, right? Mrs. Spino noticed that there's a peculiar shape. Does that have anything to do with the speed of the train? Yeah, there's a lot that we can have students start to think and share about if we just give them some time. So thank you also for honoring each other's wait time, thinking time while we go through this. Appreciate that. Okay, so we're not going to show this video because it is quite similar, but it's interesting. Why the first video? Is there value in bringing in other resources as well? Well, a common question that I have gotten when I've shared that video is it real? And actually it is. So this phenomenon that's in the 3rd grade Amplify unit, it does come from something that is real, as you saw in the first clip. It's a prototype that's in Japan currently and will be available to the public there in the year 2027. We have another wondering here, are magnets involved? Because this person, Jennifer, I'm hesitant to try your last name. I'm sorry if I mispronounce it, Miss Raxiotis. She is remembering something like this as she's seen before. And that's really what students get to do too. They get to make connections to things they have experienced or seen before as well. Those are valid and really welcomed contributions. Thank you. All right, so if you can go to the next slide. As mentioned, this is a phenomenon that's built into an existing unit for 3rd grade and Amplify Science. And the story behind all this, rather than just showing an interesting clip, there's a storyline built in that there is a fictional town of Faraday, and the the mayor has announced that a new train is going to be brought into the city that's faster and uses less energy. And the people of that city are excited, but they're also a little hesitant because they're concerned about the safety, not understanding how it works. So the students are tasked to help the mayor come up with an explanation that will help the citizens understand this floating train. So the anchoring phenomenon here is, how is it possible for a train to float? And if you could look at how this storyline unfolds in the chapter level phenomena found at the bottom here. So if you can look at the chapter level questions, you might notice a progression of how students look at forces in general. And then they build upon that by looking at more specifics, like how the train can rise, how the train can rise without even touching it, how does it fall, how does it fight against opposing force of gravity, how does the train move from changing, floating to falling, right? So you're looking at the overall storyline as a teacher so that you know the pathway that students are about to take to understand this phenomenon, right? So we as a teacher, we want to know the end destination. We want to know how students are going to journey through this so that we can support their changes in thinking. So here's a tool for doing that. On the next slide, you'll see a way that we can help students keep track of their learning publicly, visibly for the whole class. So this is a unit phenomenon tracker, and you can see the headings at the top. We can keep track of various activities that students are engaging in, those activities that provide opportunities for the SEPs, science and engineering practices. We can keep track of the evidence that they're collecting and gathering throughout these activities. And we can ask the students as small groups, whole groups, to kind of share out how these activities make a connection to the anchoring phenomenon, right? So this is a way for the students to have a visible, accessible tool to keep track of evidence so that later they can piece all this together to come up with a final causal explanation for how this train is able to float. So what we've just introduced to you is a brief overview of that first ambitious science teaching practice of planning for engagement with the important science ideas. So later, here's that purple slide again. When you take this back to your staff, how do you plan to facilitate this section, including or starting from the quick video of the floating train to showing how such a phenomenon can be carried out through a unit using tools such as the unit phenomenon tracker, and our goal or our task as a teacher to understand the whole unit, right? So if you can take a look at these facilitation questions again, what are key points you want to make sure you want to highlight? What are some logistical or planning issues that you can anticipate? And what are some possible teacher responses or potential challenges you want to consider before you plan to present this to your staff or colleagues? So we're going to invite you to go to your breakout rooms once again and reflect on this recent section of the floating train and the unit built around it. Any questions before we go to our breakout rooms again? All right, so let's go and meet our partners. All right, so can we take a moment to quickly share out or debrief what are some highlights that we want to make sure come across to our colleagues here? And what are some considerations that we're going to prepare for when we share?
We talked in our breakout room about the importance of not skipping something because everything builds upon it. Each chapter builds upon the other knowledge. And if we want the kids to get to the understanding at the end, we can't skip anything.
That's a good point. Thank you. And that requires us to kind of have an overview of the whole unit before beginning, right? Thank you. Would anyone like to build on that or have a different idea to share?
I'll share. Our group was talking about the time to plan, like when to plan. Sometimes the resources are given to us, for example, subs, and then things happen where they have to get pulled to cover classes. So we were thinking about maybe requesting an after-school planning session where everyone can just jump in and just look into one of these lessons and really dive in and see what teachers can come up with.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ms. Delgadillo. And I do think that administrators are very willing lately to help us with that, right? Giving us a planning time. So, it doesn't hurt to ask. All right, thank you for sharing. And I believe at this time we're preparing for a quick 5-minute break. So please take this moment to stretch and refuel yourselves, and we'll see you back in 5 minutes. Thank you.
A quick cup of coffee or tea, maybe some decaf, Erica. We were talking about that earlier. So for this next activity, I'm going to guide you to go back over to your participant slide deck, and I'll place the link in the chat just in case you didn't get a chance to make a copy for yourself. So you're going to go over to your participant slide deck and review slides 4 through 6 in your slide deck. And you're going to be comparing and contrasting 3 different samples of students' initial and final models. So take about a minute or two to look at each of those samples. And Craig, if you'd like to just kind of scroll through slides 21 through 23 in our presentation, so you can see what they're going to be looking at. So this is one student sample to look at. This is the second student sample. And the third student sample. So let's go ahead and go back to the directions, Craig, to slide 21 if possible. So yeah, you'll take about a minute or two. You can zoom in from your slide deck to look at the details of what students, students wrote, what they drew, and have a general idea of what they did for each of them, for their initial and for their final. And then when we come back, we'll go through each one and type in your chat, or maybe possibly have a volunteer or two share out what they notice about the differences between each of those models that the students created. Does anyone have any questions on what you're looking at this point for the next like 4 minutes? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions. Okay. Craig, do you want to go over to at least maybe the next slide and we can. Thank you. Okay, let's go ahead and start with the first student sample. Would anyone like to share out in either by typing in the chat or unmuting yourself? What do you notice about the differences between the initial and the final models created by the students? So what we see on our screen now, the first student sample, or slide 4 in your participant slide deck. Are we still reviewing or taking a closer look at the other ones? Or, oh, I see an answer here in the chat. Hortensia says the final model appears to have more accurate details. Yes, thank you. Claire says the student thought it was more like a rocket, making it float initially. And if yes, go ahead.
I was just going to say the final model, you start to see magnetic wave, magnetics, more of like some of the terminology that the kid has learned over the process of the lessons.
Absolutely, they've definitely acquired that academic language, and you see that progress over time from that initial idea, which perhaps if you zoom into that description above the train, they mentioned something about like something that makes it go up, or they kind of think it might be air But then now in their final, we're seeing more descriptive words, academic content. Sarah says the final, Berenice says the final model has a written explanation. Students use science terms. And Sarah said the final model has more scientific vocabulary. Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for your participation. Let's take a look at the second example. Okay, what did you notice about the difference from this initial model and the final model? You can zoom in on your slide deck to see the details and from each of those samples. So let's look at that initial model. What is maybe some kind of partial understanding that the student had in that initial one? Is there evidence of some partial understanding, perhaps?
You see that they had the concept of the magnets already in the initial introduction.
Yes, thank you, Lupe. Yeah, absolutely. They see, the spelling might be a little off, but hey, they've got some partial understanding of something's going on there with the magnet. And Berenice says the initial model shows students' prior knowledge. The student might have seen this before and knows there are magnets involved. Final model has detailed explanation about, detailed explanation about the magnets. The student brought some background knowledge and shows a definite building of understanding over the unit. Yes. Yeah, and Indian put a little rocket in there. You notice they still have slight partial misunderstandings, partial understanding and a slight misconception about the rocket. They still included it even in their final model. So that would be something that could be adapted for further instruction as well. Okay, let's take a look at our third and final sample. Again, we're going to compare and contrast those models at initial and final models. What do we notice? Jennifer says uses more specific vocabulary, attract, repel. Maricela says both are similar, but the final model has scientific vocabulary. Claire has initial understanding of magnets. Both models show a creative mind. Yes. Thank you for noticing that. Yeah, absolutely. In their explanation, they still have those magnets in that initial, but yeah, that academic vocabulary and is visible in that final model. Okay, so next slide, Craig. Thank you all for sharing. So as you look through these initial ideas and understandings with your students, you can organize, them into similar groups to see the various thinking that is happening. Allowing your students to listen to and to see the different ideas can help them begin the process of analyzing and critiquing hypotheses so as to support or refute them. So making student work public is not only an important step, but authentic scientific practice. So students make explicit what they currently believe about the science behind the scenario. And more importantly, they will revisit these representations in the middle of the unit and then at the end of the unit to make those changes. So as you notice in this slide, There's 3 possible groupings or 3 explanations. One believe it something related to air from the train or the track pushes the train. So that kind of reminds me of like those air hockey, perhaps. So they have a little bit of understanding maybe about friction and frictionless surfaces. The second example, the rocket under the train pushes the train. And then finally, another student who believes that the magnets under the train and on the train interact to push the train. So we're seeing some partial understandings as well, perhaps.
Lillian, I'm going to make a connection to another PD that we had recently.
Yes. Yes.
That and a couple of our participants were there. There was a question about who generates these claims that students are exploring. And so here we see then that initial model that the students generate is that opportunity to have student generated claims. And these are the student generated claims that are being brought out from the initial thinking, from that initial modeling. And then this is what the students will then negotiate and analyze as they're going through the unit. Is the claim that I made early on, is it being substantiated by the evidence, or do I need to change my thinking? And how does that compare with other students' claims in my class? So thank you, Lillian.
Well, thank you, Craig. Yes, thank you. I was thinking about that previous PD as well. Yeah, thank you. And that question, it was a really valid question as well. Okay, we can go on to the next slide, and we're going to see the what, how, and why of student models. So the what models show what is happening. These models often are oversimplified initial models that students are able to produce. So as a teacher, we are supporting them to produce the how and the why models over time, so over the course of the unit. The how model explains how the phenomenon is able to occur, and the why model explains why they fundamentally work the way they do. So the why model is the deeper conceptual understanding that could be applied to similar scenarios.
And so kind of one way to think about this is the what is what's seen, what do we see? And then they're building into what they can't see and what they have to build in their mind. And this is the modeling part.
Right, yeah, the unobservable. So they're demonstrating the unobservable in their models, and then applying the concepts to explain the why in their models. So again, going back, we actually went back to this slide as well. So our main objective in teaching science is to support changes in students' thinking over time. So again, as Erica mentioned, we launch our anchoring phenomena. Students build that initial model or idea or explanation. Over the course of lessons, they acquire some more knowledge. They have an opportunity to revisit that model or explanation to add or change ideas, continue with further lessons and more constructing of knowledge through the science and engineering practices, and then finally getting to that, writing that final explanation about the phenomena. So let's think about, how does phenomena assist student learning and understanding of content? Or in other words, how does phenomena support students in their learning?
I think the phenomenon is what engages the students. It draws their attention. It wants them, it provides them an opportunity to want to know the why.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Diane. Absolutely. So it's gonna, definitely intrigue the students to want to learn more and be curious, launch that, that curiosity about it and want to be able to explain it and know that maybe at this point they don't know exactly everything about it, but they will, and they'll be able to explain it well using that academic language. Thank you. Okay, so now our next slide, we're going to be again putting on our facilitator hat, what we would do, and think about what are key points we want to make sure to highlight with this activity, with this last set of slides that were presented. What can we highlight as we present or share this with our colleagues? And also, what are some logistical and planning issues to consider when facilitating this activity, or any possible alternate protocols that you might use for this activity, and why? So we'll invite you to your breakout rooms for about 4 minutes again to think about, to have this conversation with your group.
And I'm sorry, but I may have accidentally, I accidentally rearranged the rooms. So you're going to be with different folks. I apologize.
That's okay.
I'm wondering if that lesson you presented to us, is that an amplified lesson for 3rd grade, or is that another type of lesson that you guys decide to share?
This one is a sample of on facilitating or any logistical or planning issues.
I'll just share what our group was saying is like sharing those kind of like drawings and showing the progress and like how much they learn throughout the unit from the initial to, you know, at the end. It could really help with the teacher buy-in too, to see how much that like the students progressed over the unit and how much they're able to write and talk about what they've learned at the end, and the vocabulary they're using and everything. And we just thought that would be a really good tool to use to help the other teachers to be more excited about doing it as well.
Oh, yay, that's great. Yeah, seeing that visual, if you see it and see that growth, you might get that buy-in. That's great. Thank you for sharing, Jennifer. Would anyone else like to share any discussion from their breakout room before we move on to our next portion? Oh, I didn't check if there's anything in the chat. Okay. All right, so at this time, I'm reintroducing Inyan.
Thank you, Lillian. All right, so we have another activity, and we're going to ask you to think about what you just saw, the importance of understanding where students are heading so that we can help them construct their understanding. And, you know, in my breakout room, we were talking about how, you know, teachers sometimes, we do have an instinct or desire to kind of steer kids in the right direction right away. And how do we deal with that ourselves as educators, right? Ms. Arias was sharing that, you know, with her staff, if they know that the program is designed, if we know our curriculum is designed to help students with discovery, that they, it's the whole point is to experience what it's like to piece together something instead of being correct right away, then it really helps with our approach as educators of letting the students discover instead of feeling like there's something wrong if they don't get the whole point right away, right? So that's really where this first ambitious science teaching practice comes in, where we know what science standards our students are discovering, and that we help them construct that bit by bit with the activities that we plan and present, right? So that's why we're going to ask you to go into this next activity of unit mapping. So in your participant deck, you're going to see some slides that prompt you to look at your science curriculum, probably the current unit you're in if you're just starting one, or perhaps your next unit if you're about to wrap up and start another. So we are going to ask you to go to breakout rooms by curriculum and possibly by grade level, or at least grade spans. And you're going to take a look at your unit or module, and you're going to look at a tool that helps you plan out what the unit might look like from beginning to end. So we're going to walk you through some slides before we ask you to go in breakout room so you can see what you'll be using in your participant deck. So first of all, accessing your curriculum. Next slide. If you are an Amplify Science School, then you can use your Schoology login to get to the digital platform. And if you don't have that installed yet, then here are the directions for how to do that. Do we have any TK teachers in here for our sessions? If we do, then TK teachers, we have print materials, and therefore you're not going to access the Schoology platform, but we do have TK digital lesson slides available, and the collection of that is available in the link that you see there on the right side. If you're not a roster carrying teacher, for example, if you're out of classroom support or an administrator, you can of course use guest logins, and those are also available to use on the demo site in the bottom right hand corner. If you are a FOSS teacher, I'm sorry, one more slide please for Amplify. Once you get to the Amplify site, on the on the right side, you're going to see tools that you'll access there on the platform, whether they be the coherence flow chart, which is a detailed overview of what students are experiencing chapter by chapter, or if you want a bird's eye view first, the unit map, which gives you the chapter phenomenon questions and the basic overview of what students are doing to figure it out. Now, if you are a FOSS school, then you're going to access the FOSS app from Schoology. On FOSS Web, you'll be able to go through your module in the investigation guide. Again, if you're admin or support, then you can use a demo account login on fossweb.com. So this is where you're going to access your curriculum. Yes, Craig?
Yeah, just a side note, because this is the leadership PD. The teachers will have access to their grade level materials, and you as a teacher have access to your grade level materials. But if you want to see the other grade levels, then you can use the demo account. Did you say that in Young? I'm sorry if you said that already.
No, thank you for pointing that out. If you're working in a breakout room with more than one grade level, you might want to use the demo account to see others.
And as you're working with your staff, as you're helping your staff, the same is true for the Amplify. You can use the demo account.
Thank you. So once you access your curriculum, what are we using to map out the unit? Here is the tool. So this is a graphic organizer where you can map out what the anchor phenomenon is, meaning what's the overall point of a unit for Amplify here. And then as you saw, you might want to reference one of the slides where we showed the floating train, the balancing forces unit, where there were chapter level questions as well. So we encourage you to look at the chapter level questions and map those out. And then under each of those chapter level questions, there's a box for you to kind of take notes for yourself. How do the investigations support what students are trying to explain here? Thinking about the unit phenomenon, how it connects to that, right? So this isn't a place for you to write detailed notes of what students are doing day by day, but rather for us as a teacher to get a sense of what are the pieces that students are constructing over time throughout the unit to get a sense of the final anchoring phenomenon, right? So for an Amplify unit, there is one major anchoring phenomenon. Now, if you're a FOSS school, you'll receive some support from one of us in your breakout room, because FOSS modules are built a little bit differently. They may have 2 or more phenomena in there. And so you would have to choose one phenomenon in that module to kind of map out for yourself. And if you have any questions, we're here to support with that. I think at this point, we have all the tools and overview of what's in your participant deck to do this. But again, please keep in mind that the overall goal is for us to experience as a teacher what it's like to get the big picture, the overview of a unit or a module, so that we know where we're trying to take our students instead of just opening up curriculum to day one and trying to go day by day. We're thinking, what is the end destination? What's that causal final explanation that we want to help our students get to? And how are we going to make sure that students are doing that? Giving ourselves this overview will help us make really key strategic instructional decisions of what we highlight, what we might want to condense. This is where we kind of get a sense of our journey as teachers, guiding students through that anchoring phenomenon. Again, we're here for support, and we'll kind of roll from breakout room to breakout room to answer any questions you may have. We're going to take about 10 to 15 minutes to go through this experience. Are there any questions we can field for you before we break out? All right, so then let's go, and we'll see you back here in 10 to 15 minutes.
So for logistical purposes, we have some grade levels with single participants. I'm going to be joining Berenice in the FOSS room, but can we have Diane? Are you good with going to kinder?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. And Lupe, would you rather go to kinder or to 5th grade? I didn't hear you, sorry. You're muted. 5th grade? Okay, I saw it, 5th grade. All right. And Lidette, how about you? Kinder or 5th grade?
I can go to kinder.
All right, you got it.
Greg, would you be able to put Lidette and I together so we can kind of get an overview for our school?
Who was that was talking?
I'm sorry, it's Diane. Diane
Okay, so
Espino.
I'm going to kinder with you.
Okay.
I'm going to kinder with you, Diane.
And Diane, I'll join you too. So if we have any questions, I can.
All right, here we go. All right.
There's a lot of 3rd grade amplified.
Yes.
Wow.
All right. So, okay. So you guys, you can jump around, right? You have the ability to jump around. Okay. All right, great. So I'll let you jump around. I'll go to the FOSS room and help with the FOSS.
There's someone who's trying to enter right now, Ian Son.
I don't know who, okay, let's admit. Let me stop. Let me. Oh, this is me. We're laughing because I always cut in on other people's slides, and now I'm not even doing my own slide. Sorry about that, everyone. Okay, so welcome back from the breakouts. Okay, so we're going to take a minute here to think about all that we've gone over today. Right, you've had an opportunity to learn about the importance of phenomena and their purpose and their connection to the science and the engineering practices. You've strung together the connection, the storyline for a unit based on the anchoring phenomenon. And now we want to sort of hear from you your thinking here and the most purposeful. So we're going to ask you to write a response to this prompt. In what ways do the purposeful use of phenomena and the science and engineering practices work together to support student learning? Right, so here we've got a diagram to represent what's happening with the phenomena, and then of course our 3 focus SEP, science and engineering practices. So we're going to give a link to the Padlet. It's in the chat already. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Inyoung. So click into the Padlet, and type a response to this question. We're going to give you a couple minutes to process and then to type.
Just a reminder to add on in the Padlet, there is a plus sign at the bottom right corner, and that's what you would click to submit a response.
Thank you. And the question is also on the Padlet.